For our lesson today, we are going to represent fractions on number lines. We have 2 key points to keep in mind as we do this today. First, the denominator tells us the number of parts in the whole. The denominator is the number on the bottom of a fraction. So for example, 1/2, this is the denominator. I'm not going to write it all. So that's how many parts go between each whole number on the number line. Key point 2, the numerator tells us how many parts we have. So in this example right here, again I won't write the whole word, the top number is our numerator. Our example number 1, Ben is traveling from his house to the store. He has traveled 3/4 of the distance. Draw an arrow to show where Ben is located. How much farther does Ben have to go? So, key point 1, I need to remember that my denominator tells us the number of parts in the whole. And so that's how many parts will go between each whole number on the number line. So what I'm going to do is divide this space from here to here into 4 parts. An easy way to do that is to divide each in half and then in half again. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it says again, he's traveling from his house to the store. He has traveled 3/4 of the distance. Now I need to look at my numerator. My numerator tells us how many parts we have. Right now he has traveled 3/4. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, I counted wrong. I don't ever count the starting point. 1, 2, 3. So here's where I'm going to put my arrow. He has traveled 3/4. Now if I were to label these, I could label them 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then this would be my 4/4 or my whole, which also could be represented as 1. And now it says how much farther does Ben have to go? He has 1/4 left. He has completed 3/4 and he has 1/4 left. So I can write that Ben has 1/4 of the distance left to go. Example 2. What does the star on this number line represent? Now I'm going to have to rationalize backwards this time, or reason backwards, because in this case I set up my denominator, or I set up the parts for my denominator. In this case I have them already divided up. So I need to count how many parts there are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a number over a line for each of the parts. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that would be 9. So that means that I have a total of 9 parts. So each of these is a 9th. I counted how many parts I had all together, and that gave me the information for my denominator, because my denominator tells us the number of parts in the whole. This is my whole between 0 and 1. So I counted 9 parts, so I knew that my denominator would be 9. And now, because I counted them one at a time, I also know how many parts we have at each point. So this would be 1/9, this would be 5/9, this would be 8/9. It asks me here, what does the star on this number line represent? 7/9. And I can write a sentence, the star represents 7/9. We have one last sample problem. Example number 3. Draw a number line that shows where 2 5/8 is located. Now this is trickier because we have not dealt with a mixed number yet. A mixed number means that we have a whole number and a fraction. For this, I'm going to need to know, first off, that I have more than one whole. So on my number line, I'm going to make sure that I include several whole numbers. So this is 0. That's where we start. And then this would be 1. And I'm going to make these numbers a little bit bigger so that I know they are my whole numbers. And 3. Now you might wonder why I did 3. Well, I know I have 2, but I also have a fraction in addition to that. So I know that I'm not going to have 3 because I didn't have a full whole yet, but I have a fraction of that. So it's 2 and a fraction, which is going to get me closer to 3. I'm not going to worry about writing anything else on this part of my number line. And in fact, I may not have even needed to write all of this, but I think it can be helpful to see how it relates to the other numbers. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now, remembering that my denominator tells us the number of parts in the whole, I can divide all of these into 8. I'm going to divide this one into 8s. Because like I said, I know that because I already have 2, this, I could color it in. This is already something that I have. Now I'll divide this into 8 parts. And again, I'm going to use what I did before, dividing it into fourths. I did a half, and then a half, and then a half. I just know this from lots of practice, that if I divide a half and half, that gives me a quarter, and then if I divide those halves again, I get 8s, and I'll check. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now these aren't measured, so they aren't perfectly equal, but in our minds we know that they represent equal parts. Now because I know that they are 8s, I'm going to label them each with the denominator of 8, because the whole is divided into 8 parts. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this would be 8 eighths. This would actually be 3 sets of 8 eighths. Now I'm going to find where 2 and 5 eighths is located. Like I said, I already know that I have 1 and 2 wholes, and then I have 5 eighths in addition to that. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 eighths. So on my number line, starting from 0, going to 3, 2 and 5 eighths is right here. So remember, as you're working on these problems, the denominator tells us how many pieces the whole is cut into, and the numerator, the number on top, tells us how many of those pieces that we have. When you have a mixed number, it means that we already have those whole pieces. If this were a cake, for example, which wouldn't be something we would line up on a number line, then we'd have 2 whole cakes, and then 5 eighths of a cake. So just remember that whenever you see these mixed numbers, that means you already have 2 whole pieces. And then you're going to find out what the fractional portion is that you have of the next whole.